One, two.
Hey, welcome back to Locked In with Craig and Tony. I'm Craig.
I'm Tony. Nice to have you back.
It's good to be back.
Yes, yes. So would you like to introduce our topic?
Yeah, okay, so, well, you know what, Tony? I'm going to let you introduce it. This is something you've been dying to talk about for a little while. So,
I've been dying to talk about Planet of the Humans, which is Michael Moore produced the movie. So he didn't actually do the documentary, but it's a documentary that kind of critiques alternative energy. So I just felt that there were some points made in the film. Some were valid, but a lot were sort of like, I don't know, not really to me relevant or a criticism of alternative energy. Kind of
sure.
like,
Yeah, sure. You know, and just for the listeners, Tony's become slightly obsessed with this film since I introduced it to him about it like 2-3 weeks ago, right?
well,
So, and we've
I
been kind of waiting to talk about this in a podcast. So, because I think we have differing, well, similar but differing opinions on the
I,
film. So,
I see a lot of people who I know who are conservative using it as a way to basically like, poo-poo alternative energy, like saying like it's no worse or better than fossil fuels, which I think is completely just an idiotic statement.
well, I think the underlying message of the film was that even though we've spent so much time studying technology and trying to improve the technology of renewable energy, specifically solar, that we still rely heavily on fossil fuels as a main resource, and that the examples that were offered in the film showed in many instances where they were touting the benefits of solar energy, only to be on a backup generator run by gasoline or oil. So I think that was kind of the underlying message of the entire thing. That yeah, renewables great, but there's we're not ready yet.
Well,
And I don't necessarily believe that, but I think that was the underlying message of the film.
I think in the film, one of the things that they missed the ball on is that there are viable ways of storing alternative energy, meaning that you can store the sun's energy so it's available at night. There's a lot of good systems. Same thing for wind, same thing for, well, water is pretty consistent. The water usually flows, but like for wind and for solar, there are viable systems that can effectively, they're proven that they're effective at storing the energy so that it's available at night. So, can I rattle off a couple?
Go.
All right. In fact, actually, if I may, let me share my screen. Hold on one second. All right. So there we go. So what you're looking at here is called an energy vault. All right. This is a relatively new company, but the idea is basically, especially in this day and age of robotics, that this system, what it does is takes the electricity. It could take the electricity from a solar plant. It could take the electricity from a wind turbine farm. And it can basically use that energy, the excess energy, to basically stack concrete blocks. And what it does is basically during the time of high input of energy from the wind turbines, it will store that energy into the concrete blocks by stacking them up, by basically creating potential energy. All right, that's just one system. Another system that they didn't talk about, there's actually a system that's in use on an island nation that has a lot of wind, but again, once in a while the wind stops. And what they do is they pump water uphill. All right, that pumped water uphill goes up to a reservoir, and it provides several different benefits. It's a water source for the village that's lower, closer to the ocean, right? But also too, when you need to basically tap that energy, all you have to do is basically let that water run through a hydroelectric system. And again, it's basically stored potential energy. Another thing they don't talk about, and this system again has been developed on smaller scales, it's used by NASA, is electrolysis. What you do is use electricity that you're generating to basically separate water into hydrogen and oxygen, all right? And at night, you basically use a fuel cell to let that, to capture that energy. or you could just simply burn that hydrogen and run a turbine. All right, zero.
That idea of the electrolysis of splitting up water into oxygen and hydrogen back in the early 2000s, I forget the guy's name. He invented a gas that was used for acetylene torches. Based on that idea, it was called aquagen. You can look it up, but he actually, using that same technology of electrolysis, he was able to make it portable and put it inside the engine of his car and change his car engine to a water burning engine. So what it would do is it would take that gas, and the idea is that it keeps the hydrogen and oxygen still together, and it would take a spark to make them come back together again, just like it takes the spark to separate them.
Yeah, the activation.
So after the combustion, so they would put the gas together, they'd send a spark into the hydrogen oxygen mix, they'd get the energy from the hydrogen explosion, right? And then the oxygen and hydrogen fuse back together to create water as exhaust. So that system was in place, and mysteriously, and around about, I think 2000, 2001, 2002, the whole idea, the whole engine disappeared. But the aquagen acetylene torch, with that as the foundation, still exists. But there's an alternative fuel source right there, just basic chemistry, and you can do it at home. Actually, you can take a battery and some water, and you take 2 leads and 2 containers and separate that water into oxygen and hydrogen, keep the gases together, and with a lighter or a spark, you can pop it up. You know, look up aquagen. Oh, here we go. Molten salt energy. Yeah, you actually, I was just, I hate to say it, I was watching a TikTok earlier, and some dude did that. He melted salt and dumped it in the toilet to get the sodium to explode. So I'm not sure if this is the same idea, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, what you described, just FYI, it's exactly what they, like in NASA, it's exactly what they do when they want to store solar energy in a space station. They actually have a plane that it's autonomous. It uses solar energy to fly, and what it does is it flies 24/7. During the daytime, it uses the sun's energy to run its motors, but at night, some of the excess energy goes into basically electrolysis, or should I say, is it hydrolysis?
It's hydrolysis through electrolysis, yeah. But
yeah,
I think that picture you have up there, isn't that area was highlighted in the that's in the Navajo Desert, right? That wasn't that highlighted in the film as that solar array as being neglected. I think that was one of the criticisms, that it's being neglected, and sandstorms kind of cover the solar panels.
There is a certain amount of maintenance that's required. You know, if you've ever sat there and, like, you know, if you've ever, especially if you like when I was remember we were in Houston, how hot your car would get, you know, almost like 9 months out of the year down in Houston, your car, if it's parked out in the sun, gets blazing hot. So the idea is that, yeah, maybe a large scale system might be challenging, but you could easily have a small scale system where a homeowner could easily keep it maintained and clean, right? And that system would deliver tons of energy. And it doesn't, and again, using
it's hard to keep clean. It's not that big.
It's you know, it's these large scale systems too. I mean, another issue is that, you know, I think that as far as keeping them clean, I think it's the maintenance that goes into keeping the mirrors clean. To me, I don't think it's any worse than the maintenance it takes to maintain the oil and gas infrastructure.
Well, I think I got to disagree with you there, because the oil and gas infrastructure it's constantly running. Like, you have an oil rig running. They can be small enough to fit into, actually right here, into my living room. And once they're running, all that is occurring underground. The major pumping is occurring underground. The problem with the panels in the desert is you just get a thin layer of silt or dust on top of them, and now you're running at less efficiency. So I think that was the argument that they were making.
I mean, I've never.
I'm not condoning the oil pumping, but I've seen them in Canada, like out in Edmonton. They have these tiny, like super small pumps, and they're cranking them out. You can put them, you know,
I'm
50
not.
feet away from
I'm just thinking like, that's just one part of the infrastructure for oil. What about the refining process? I'm saying, what about the delivery and the pipes? I could rattle off, tons of systems
Sure.
that go into basically bringing that oil to market, not even getting into the pollution. I mean, again, is a massive scale system like this, does it need to be this big? Because I think when you get it scaled up to certain, and then the other thing is too, why not, if you can have a Roomba clean your room, why can't you have, some sort of robotic system? I don't see why you couldn't have that built into the system, where that, there would be basically like a brush system. I don't see why you couldn't create a mirror that basically has properties, all right, special properties that would basically make it resistant, all right, that the glass, like dust wouldn't stick to it. I don't see
because
it.
then Andrew Yang would be up in arms about someone not having a job, and cleaning mirrors would be automated.
But again, yeah, people could, if you can have a custodian sweep a floor, you could have a cleaning, a service staff basically going around and routinely cleaning the glass, So I think it's a non-issue. But the larger point I wanted to bring up here, I think that they were mentioning again, energy storage. Well, perfect example that in Spain, they use a molten salt system so that the solar energy is stored and available overnight. So not only are they basically generating electricity during the course of the day, but they also have that molten salt, which can basically create steam and drive a generator. And again, it's just simple mathematics. When you calculate how much energy strikes the earth from the sun, all right, hands down, there's more than enough alternative energy available if you're willing to catch it. And there are criticisms to me about energy storage. Another one that we didn't even touch upon is this one, if I may. It's called a flow battery. And what it is that it works. Let me see if I can find an image. Oh, here it is. All right. So a flow battery, what you do is basically, it's kind of like a fuel cell. The electric potential is created. Vanadium is one of the better known substances. Let me see a bigger picture. Let me see. Take a look at this. Open. Image a new tab. So what you have here, this picture's kind of small.
Not better.
Hold on a second.
There you go.
So it's tough to read, but what you basically have is you have two tanks. Typically, it's the same element, but with different oxidative states, right? And then you have like a proton. Yeah, exactly. And then you have them in different. So one's like +3, the other one's +2. There's electric potential there, and you can use this system to basically you pump the electrolyte, and you could use this system to basically store charge. It's actually very cheap, very simple. The reason why they don't use it like on vehicles is that it doesn't have high energy density like lithium, but it is very economical. And it's actually, they have, now the vanadium is a relatively toxic substance, but they have other systems with other electrolyte solutions that are relatively friendly to the environment, so that, God forbid, there was a spill, it wouldn't be a disaster. But the large point here is that this is a very effective system for storage of energy in a large-scale stationary system, all right? And again, I could probably rattle off, I mean, there's definitely, without a doubt, more ways you could store the energy. Because they were mentioning about how Tesla's battery system, their lithium ion packs, right now only are capable of storing, a small fraction of the energy needed. And it's an idiotic point because there are so many different ways. Probably the best way is the electrolysis, where you split water into hydrogen and oxygen. It's one of the best systems because
it just goes back to water. Once it releases its energy, it just goes back
exactly.
to
There's no carbon there's no carbon in the cycle. All right.
Well, I was watching something on Amazon Prime about Tesla, and again, we unlock we unlock his patents, we take a look at what the government has, and we can get that free energy that he was talking about. He had it all set up, and
Well,
he predicted cell phones. He predicted all the things we have today. It's there. If we just
keep in mind,
invest money
I
in
think it was JP
technology.
Morgan was the one who was financially backing him.
Yeah,
Once
Edison.
Tesla started talking about free energy, that kind of made JP Morgan pull out the financial carpet.
Right.
So, yeah. Well, that gets into my other system that,
Is this going to be? Are you going to lock it down?
No, I mean, are we ready to? I don't think we're ready to lock it down.
If you want to get into
All right, because the one thing I'm going to mention too in the movie, they did bring up a valid point. Now, they did bring up the point that to create a lot of the alternative energy systems, you do have to do a lot of mining of minerals and materials.
Right. And that's where a lot of the cost comes.
Well, not just that. That's also where a lot of the environmental damage comes from.
Sure.
So, but
because those drillers, those miners, they all use fossil fuels in order to extract whatever it is they're extracting. So that was the argument in the film, is that in order to use the renewables effectively, you got to use fossil fuels in order to produce.
But that's a false argument, because at some point, if you keep building your alternative energy supply, the fossil fuels become a smaller component of your energy.
But that's if, and that's not. It's not what's. Excuse me. It's not what's happening. That's the problem.
Well,
that was the argument.
That's not the fault of alternative energy. That's the fault of humans making a choice.
It's the fault of the system. It's the fault of the system. I know. It's not that alternative energy wouldn't be effective. We just don't spend enough time because it's not lucrative.
I mean, so I think, that point I think is, and again, I think that there also, there are simpler systems that require less sophisticated electronics that could capture solar energy. A perfect example would be basically that the mirror system's good, but you can easily get the same effect from polished metal, and it's more durable. And the system itself requires, you've got to use metal, but the metal you're using, it'll last a long time. It'll stay viable.
Is this our Stirling engine?
Huh?
Is this leading into our Stirling engine experiment?
Stirling engines aren't bad, but I think a parabolic mirror that's basically just polished metal, you could even make a parabolic mirror out of like Mylar.
Yeah, I still have that dish, that solar dish, or the Dish Network dish.
Yeah.
What the hell? The
satellite dish.
Thank you. The satellite dish that I'm waiting for you to polish down. So
actually,
I want to get rid of the thing, to be honest.
I think what's easier is just get the reflective duct tape. It'll work pretty well. I mean, you can sand it down and polish it. It's not bad. I just have to look up to because you have to be careful, because like polishing is kind of tricky. You have to go, but I mean, it should be doable. But you might need like polishing powder. It might get a little involved, but it should be doable. But my point being is that like those metal mirrors are gonna, and especially if you coat them so that they don't oxidize, you just make sure you do it right. You know what I'm saying? They could be quite effective with very little energy input, and they could last for eons of time. All right, if you maintain them properly. So, but I've even seen here. There's actually, again, let me go back to let me pull up. I mean, to give you an idea how simple a system, Mylar solar collector. So, you could use Mylar, right? I'm not going to say that Mylar is the most environmentally, but in terms of like energy input, it takes very little energy input. There was actually a system I saw where they actually had inflatable parabolic mirrors that had a Mylar, and they were clear on the inside. They're dirt cheap. They cost about as much to make as like a beach ball, and they actually work. They collect the sun's energy effectively. So you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, the notion that, there aren't, that you're not gonna do away with mining. You know what I'm saying? It's always going to be there at some level. But I think at the end of the day, if you're increasing your pool of alternative energy, then the whole argument about the fossil fuels that go into mining starts to become a non-issue, because then your energy starts to rely more and more on your increasing pool of alternative energy.
Well, that's really the issue, is that right now we just don't have that. And you know, once we are heavily reliable or relied upon renewable energy, then we don't need the mining, which is what you said. But right now, you know, our political interests and you know, corporate interests aren't having it. So that's we gotta.
I still make the argument the film vilifies alternative energy for sins that alternative energy did not commit. Like, they were criticizing, you know, the economic interest of Goldman Sachs, and that apparently some of the big environmental groups had sketchy financial connections to like investment banks or something. Well, yeah, that I don't like that. All right. But that's not the criticism of alternative energy. It's a criticism of our capitalist system, or our system of capitalism, not alternative energy's fault. The other thing, the one thing they brought up that I thought was valid, and this is something I bring out, I kind of point out, and I don't say it directly, but I point out to my students when I teach environmental science that the number one issue in environmental science is population. And the hard reality, and the film brings this up, and it's one of the few good points it made, is that at the end of the day, our biggest issue is not how we get our energy, it's our energy demand in total because of human population. And even if we dramatically change how we live our lives, it's still gonna basically be issues that there's just so many humans, it's gonna tax the system. So, I mean, that's not a pleasant thought, you know. And you know, who wants, you know, no one wants to line up to leave the planet.
That's true. That is true.
So I think that one point they made was a valid point. That gets into basically birth control, you know, incentivizing, you know, but our capitalist system.
Yeah, the whole thing. Listen, everything is all connected, and that is why I think the movie kind of highlighted it, is that our capitalistic system is responsible for the lack of renewable production and efficiency. Because until we don't need it, fossil fuel is going to do its job. I mean, and I find it funny that we're talking about this now, and the film came out during the pandemic, that, you know, the consumption of fossil fuels was so reduced that, you know, the price per barrel of oil was in the negative, you know. So it just shows you that we don't, you know, if we don't go out and you know, commute or travel as much, we change that aspect of our life, and fossil fuels are like, they're useless. I mean, yeah, we can fuel our homes and heat our homes, but aside from that, I mean, well, you know, solar and wind can do the same thing.
I think that, you know, I think some of the criticisms of the film, I think that, again, population control, we do have to lower our numbers. We're way beyond what's sustainable. I think the other issue is too that it has to be comprehensive. So the consumption end has to be dealt with too.
I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. I know that there's a lot of doomsday preppers who think that the population's out of control. I just think that our location, it's our locations of the population and the population densities that are out of control. There's plenty of room on this planet. There's plenty of resources on this planet if we use it right. And I'm not talking, you know, fossil resources. I'm talking about natural resources: the sun, the wind, water. We have everything we need, and it's the fact that we are such social beings that we have to live on top of each other in mass communities. You look at India, you look at China, you look at New York City. You know, we have 8 million people living in what, 12 square miles? Or not even 12 square miles, 12 miles long, right? And it's kind of dumb, to be honest with you. We don't need to be on top of each other when Canada is this huge expanse. It's beautiful land. We don't need to raise it and rake it and rape it in order to live in it. But we can modify the way we construct homes the way we do business in
I'm
order
not.
to live with the planet. We have plenty of space, and
I'm
we're
not.
just
I'm
being
not so.
ignorant in how we distribute.
I'm not so certain that spreading out is the solution. I think actually people concentrating their footprint into a smaller area, all right, but changing how they live, meaning changing what they eat, changing the efficiency of their home. You know what I'm saying? I think that, make sure that their home is energy efficient across the board, well insulated. But I think actually spreading people out is just damaging more ecosystems because
No, that's what I said. You don't have to damage the ecosystem and change the system in order to create living structures. We don't have to do that, but it's the way that we've developed the system. But the problem is, and is we don't want to change the way things have always been done. And that's the main issue. That's why fossil fuels have existed for this long, because we don't want to change the way the system's already been done, because that would require more effort, more work, more manpower, and we don't want to do it. We want to do more stuff with less manpower. That's the American corporate way. Get more by paying out less. And finding another way of construction without destroying the environment around it is
I
a challenge.
I'm completely. I think that population wise, I just first of all, if you look at a chart that shows human population and CO2 emissions, they're right on top of each other, meaning that for every
That's
human.
true. But
So
again, I'm saying, but yeah, they are on top of each other because of our uses, and you said it, our lifestyle. We know what we eat. Listen, there's one person per square mile in Montana. I mean, there's plenty of space to live. Now, what are we going to do with that space? Do we have to rape it and make, little subdivisions and wealthy communities? Or is there a way to build and construct with the environment to not destroy it?
but it's not just how it's not just housing, it's water.
That's part of it.
You know,
That's part of it, because how do we do our work? How do we do our travel, our commuting? Listen, you look at an area where we live here, right? Most of the damage that's done to our environment is commuting from the suburbs into New York City, right? You lose that. Look what's happening, in our area with now that nobody's commuting. Things have been cleaning up. They actually, I was actually down by the Lincoln Tunnel. There was this road that had been potholed for the longest time. They actually, since no one's been out on the road, they took advantage and fixed it up. But we can get more done when there's less movement using automobiles, and with the technologies that we have today, we can definitely do that. And I know what you're going to say about the way our lifestyle as far as eating. All right, that's another thing too, is our beef consumption is out of control. Our meat consumption is out of control, and that is a huge contributor to the climate problem.
I mean, I just think the numbers don't add up. Like, I'll give you a great example.
Well, Tony, wait, the population hasn't gone down, right?
Yeah.
And yet in the last month, our emissions have decreased.
Well,
So nothing's changed aside from the ability to go back and forth and use the energy outside of our homes. That was the issue. I don't even know where I heard it. Was on NPR. They did the study.
What you're looking at is a small segment of the pollution problem.
Right, it's a small segment, but we've only done it in a month, and it's decreased drastically.
But
so
again, what you're looking at,
that lifestyle change, things go the way we need them to go.
Are people still eating?
Yeah, they're still eating, but they're not contributing by consuming fossil fuels. That is
your biggest CO2 emissions is not your car; it's your meat consumption. Period. Right, and then the other issue is
listen. Indians don't eat cows. There's a huge. There's how many
Americans
Indians are there? There's more Indians than there are Americans.
Yeah, but also
and they don't. So I mean,
that's only one country. It's only 1 billion people out of 7, 8
right.
billion.
Then we could go as the other Asian countries that don't eat cows. We are a heavy beef consumer.
It's not just cows. It's any form of meat. There are less bad than cows. You know, there are less bad sources of protein. But at the end of the day, any livestock you're consuming creates a lot of CO2 emissions, a lot of methane emissions. All right. So, but larger issue, again, perfect example of where human population is unsustainable is water usage. We're running out of water. Even if we went vegan to produce enough food, you know, vegetarian food, plant-based diet, that even that, our water consumption for agriculture and industry is off the charts.
Well, the problem with that is we've screwed up the water cycle and the weather patterns. So, and I'm just going to speak specifically for the United States. You know that areas that have been considered the Dust Bowl, the plains, are even more susceptible to drought. Whereas the coast, specifically our coast, because the weather travels from west to east and brings all precipitation our way, we've been getting more disastrous weather because of the moisture in the air that's being sucked up from the middle of America. And we've done that because we've increased the climate change, the global temperature. Now, we stop contributing to that you know, the climate change using fossil fuels. Let's just say we eliminate that, and everything else doesn't change. We can start to reverse this just by eliminating that one thing, because aside from the human population, it is our consumption of CO2 that is right in line with the global temperature. And that's more than our population. Now, we've already discussed the water situation one other time. And we're on a planet that is 2/3 water, right? Now, most of it is not drinkable, and we've discussed the salination or desalination process and how expensive that would be. And I think I took your position last time, but now I'm going to play devil's advocate and say that we've got plenty of water, and we've got plenty of resources. We just have to start using them differently if we're going to sustain life on this planet. We don't have to, and you know what, sadly, the population is going to continue to grow. It shouldn't grow as exponentially as it's been. And diseases like COVID-19 are, I believe, the Earth's way of saying, all right, we gotta cut this down a little bit, even though it's only knocked out, what, 2% of the population so far?
I just basically, I feel like the one point the movie made,
0.2%. I'm sorry. 0.2%.
Okay. I think the point the movie made is that, hands down, that we are way over the carrying capacity of this planet, and that it's unrealistic to expect people to live, large swaths of the population to live like these, it's not realistic to basically have the water limits. All right. It's not realistic to expect the climate to repair itself anytime soon.
Listen,
which means that the shortage of fresh water that's available through natural water cycle, that water availability is not going to change anytime soon. And if you look at the groundwater, all right, NASA's done studies. They could do basically with ground penetrating radar. They can get a good idea about where the water supplies are and how where they are in terms of the water table, and things are not good. So to me,
we have Great Lakes that are all fresh water. We can use that. I think there's plenty of resources. It's just we, especially here in America, we have to change the way we consume, the way we live. Our obesity problem is contributing to climate change.
But it's
that's
not just
an issue. It's also, yeah, it's the way we consume, Tony.
But it's not just the United States. It's across the globe.
I disagree. Yeah, you don't see Europeans don't live the way we do. Yeah, the Asian countries don't live the way we do. We are a wasteful society, and you know from working in a restaurant, we've both worked in restaurants, how much food goes at the end of the night that's just garbage, and it's perfectly fine. You know, we live in a wasteful society. We change the way we live. Yeah, take a look at map of water abundance. Try that one.
But see, salt water, because again, it gets into, all right, that this one's a little simpler. So let's take a look at this one here. Let me see if I can actually look at the image.
Yeah, look at the United States in that picture. All right, see where it's red? That's the Dust Bowl. That's what I was saying.
Well, this is the Southwest.
right. That's what's happening in the United States. Is water is being evaporated from the ground in the Western United States because it is so hot, and it's been moving east and dumping on us, causing hurricanes, not typhoons, tropical storms.
So just a lot of the moisture that ends up coming into like our area, the Northeast,
Mhm.
it's either a nor'easter where you have a counter-cyclical storm bringing in water air from the ocean, or it's the Gulf Stream, the jet stream coming up, which is basically kind of carrying moisture from the Gulf
No,
and the coast.
our moisture comes from Middle America, middle of the United States.
No,
Yeah, no, tropical storms come from there because of the heavy moisture content. Ours, if you watch the weather patterns and the pressure patterns come from there and dump east.
the
So
moisture the moisture that's riding up the jet stream up here is actually starts in the Gulf of Mexico.
yeah, that's jet stream moisture. I'm talking just general moisture from the United States on a day-to-day basis. You follow the weather patterns, you follow the pressure patterns. Pressure is a direct relationship of the amount of moisture that's in the air, right? And we get it from the Western United States, and that's why we get it right out of the groundwater. You don't see California with these problems because their moisture is pushed back because of the Rocky Mountains. We get everything from over there.
They just went through a massive drought.
Yeah, they did.
Well, listen,
Last year
I'm
they did.
gonna make the argument that a complex system. I'm not a meteorologist. I do have some basic ideas, but it's beyond the scope of our discussion. But what I will say is this: when you look at this map, all right, there are a lot of places where water is a big issue. All right,
Tony, but there's no. I mean, you look at Africa and Sudan. That's no surprise. We've known that for. Hey, listen, we've been around for over 50 years almost, and we've known that area is dry and there's no food, there's no water, and that's Please, it's always been that way. There's plenty of resources here. We just abuse them, and that's the problem.
I'm not saying that, but the other thing is too that keep in mind it's not just water. The oceans are being fished out. All right, they're collapsing fish stocks. So a lot of the planet gets its protein from fish.
Yes,
and those stocks are collapsing.
Yes, but why are they collapsing? Because we're changing this. Now again, here we go. This is where our roles are reversed. Right, they're changing the salinity of the oceans. Right, the lives that's a problem. And some animals can adapt. Others can't.
Ocean's not. It's not being it's not salinity. It's the acidity.
Yeah, well, the acidity is coming from the positives. Yeah, from the CO2, sure.
It's what happens when you increase the CO2 in the atmosphere. It just will diffuse.
It gets absorbed by and
in the ocean,
right? Yeah,
and it's becoming acidified. It's not a massive change, but it is a significant change.
It is a significant change.
Coral
reefs are being bleached out, and it's being bleached because the bacteria that lives in those reefs, that the reefs feed off of, or that the coral feeds off of, and the animals, the fish life that feeds off the coral and those bacteria, they're losing their fuel source. They're losing their food source. So that's why we're losing our fishing industry, or the fishing population.
It's complex, but the larger issue I think with the fish is again, too many people, too little resources.
It all goes back to the way that we're treating our climate, the way we're treating our planet. There's plenty of if we weren't using fossil fuels and climate change wasn't an issue, okay, there would be plenty of fish in the sea. There's be plenty of clean water. We have to eliminate the contributing factor. We move that out of the equation, and you watch how quickly systems restore themselves. We've been eating beef for centuries. We've been eating beef for centuries. We've been processing meat and beef and pork for a couple centuries now, since the 1700s, right? So 1800s. It's the way our industry works. If we could do this another way.
I think my view. So, I think the one good point they made in the film, all right, and this may be a lock it down moment. What?
Okay,
You
go
want to
ahead.
lock it down?
Go ahead. You lock it down.
All right. The one good point they made in the film is that our population numbers are unsustainable. That we're at 8 billion people and growing with no signs of slowing. And that the energy demands to bring water, food, transportation, housing, you name it, anything that we need to survive, that these basic things, that the one thing we have to do, the one way we can basically lower our environmental footprint is by lowering the number of humans. So, and that requires basically policies that don't encourage or just basically, it's complex. But what I will say is that the one thing that Planet of the Humans got right is that human population, we're at a way beyond what's sustainable. All right. And that if you look at water resources, if you look at fish stocks, if you look at carbon in the atmosphere, if you look at degraded environment ecosystems that are on the verge of collapse because of the demands we're putting on them for farming, for forestation, for resources, for mining, that the one thing they got right in the film is that yes, that we have to lower our numbers. That's a given. Everything else beyond that is debatable, but human population is the number one environmental issue. Locking it down. Craig, your response.
I made my point with, I don't, sure, the population in our lifetime has gone from 4 billion to almost 8 billion people on the planet in our lifetime. That is a fact.
Yes.
Right. But also on top of that comes with more industrialization of nations that didn't have it when we were kids.
Yeah.
Okay. And in that industrialization, what comes with that? Using more fossil fuels.
Consumerism, all the other, yeah.
Correct. And to me, that is the main point. Now, yeah, they did say that, but if we change the way we do business, we change the way we do construction, consumption, the way we currently live now, that's what's unsustainable. Not that there's a large population, because if everyone tended a garden in their own backyard, if everyone created their own food, if everyone lived on solar and wind, and we transformed the way we use energy and the way we consume food, then I think that's what the point the movie was trying to make was, yeah, the population's increasing, but with that population increase comes the fossil fuel usage increase. All right, and the climate change.
Well, they were bringing up points that's kind of like the old lady who swallowed the fly, that the new technologies we develop, are just creating new problems. So, the old woman who swallowed a fly, then she swallows was it the cat, then the dog. So anyhow,
to kill all the problems. Yeah, one problem solved.
I take my view is that it's actually going to be a comprehensive solution. It's not going to be one dimensional, and I think that unfortunately, I don't think it's realistic.
Well, it's also not realistic to limit the population. We are on this planet designed to do one thing: procreate.
China did it.
Yeah, China did it, and they also killed millions of girls because they didn't want to have girls in their population.
Well, that was because they wanted the last name.
We might not want to do that.
You can incentivize small families.
You could, unless your religion dictates that you are.
Iran's population growth has leveled off dramatically. They had exponential population growth. They were like a high growth. And then what changed in their country, and this is across the board, is the education of women. If you educate women, all right, and they enter the workforce and they have choices, they tend to put off childbirth, and that's the easiest way to get to negative population growth.
That's true, but also we do want to educate women and to understand their bodies, birth control, reproduction, absolutely.
Have economic options other than marrying somebody and having kids.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Sure. But at the same time, you look at a country like Italy, they're not getting married and having kids, and actual full-blooded Italians aren't going to exist in another, I think they said 15 years.
Well,
I mean,
they're not going to disappear completely.
no. Full-blooded actual Italians. Now they'll be mixed with God knows what, but actual
Well,
Italian
that's also
Italians.
because they have a lot of immigration coming in from like Northern Africa.
No, it's just that the actual Italian young people aren't getting married and they're not having sex. They're not having kids.
They're having sex, they're just not having kids.
Well, okay, yeah, that might be true.
Hey,
All
come
right,
on,
so
they're Italian.
I want to lock in a point.
It's Italy, guy.
Well, they're the COVID country. I want to lock in a point. I saw something today, and this kind of jumps completely off topic. But I want to lock something in, and then we got to end this.
Can I put one lock it in? I think that if we're going to improve the overall ecosystem of the planet, it's going to be comprehensive. It's going to involve change of how we get our energy, change in what we eat,
Yes.
change in how we transport, change in our housing, but it's also going to require a change in our numbers because we're running too close to the edge. All right.
Well, hey, listen, every 100 years the Earth cleans us out, so
COVID may be just a symptom.
Yeah. All right. So before we end, I want to lock something in today. I just saw it happen. They just reported about an hour and a half ago that Joe Biden won the Hawaiian primary with 63% of the vote. And my take on this whole Joe Biden thing, I know we're going totally away from the topic of climate change and the Planet of the Humans movie, but I got to say this because I believe that he and his policies are part of the problem that gave us a lot of what we're going through now, whether it's with Trump, whether it's with
it is clinging to the past.
Yeah, and it is clinging to the past, exactly. So I saw this today, and I see that Joe Biden wins by 63%, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. He's the only guy left. If he was so great, why didn't he get 100% of the vote? Well, because there's a whole populace of people who do not buy into this. We got to go back to when it was good. We got to go back to when it was better. So my take is we need to stop this in its tracks now before this becomes another huge problem. On Thursday morning, Joe Biden was on the Breakfast Club in New York, and he came out in the Breakfast Club on Hot 97, I believe.
Yeah, I know. I saw the clip.
Yeah, you saw it, right? And he said, if you ain't black, I watched the whole thing. It was only about 15 minutes. If you ain't black, if you vote for Trump, you ain't black, and listen, teaching in an all-black school where we were, you do get comfortable saying things like that, when you're among the population and you're accepted by the population. But I just don't believe that he was accepted by the population, especially since he has a history of voting for mass incarcerations of blacks and Latinos, and then rides Obama's coattail saying, oh, yeah, I voted for that, but look, I'm with this guy. So like he's the guy with the white guy with the T-shirt. Like
Joe Biden was a senator, but Bill Clinton was the president, who was very popular with African Americans, who basically signed that bill.
Right, correct.
The whole idea behind a super predator.
Right, and who's exactly, and who supported it? Joe Biden, along with his statements that black kids can go just as far as, or what do you say? Black kids can go as, he said, poor kids can go just as far as white kids, or something like that, meaning that white kids aren't poor. Now, I grew up, I wasn't the wealthiest, and I'm very white. So when I hear things like this, it angers me. But then when I see the numbers that he's not getting full support of the population, we got to look at this primary system and say, people should not have dropped out. We should not have forced people out. Give me a second. We shouldn't have forced people out, and let the system run the way it was. When they were asked on the stage, when 11 candidates were asked on the stage, if someone has the most delegates but not enough to clinch the nomination, will you declare that person the winner? And at that point, Bernie Sanders was heavily in the lead, and he said, yeah, I will support that winner, because he knew it was going to be him. And everyone else said, let's let the system play out. Well, if you let the system play out and you rig it in the middle of it, and when you're going into a heavily black population, and the other moderate candidates are definitely not popular in that community, then yeah, you're going to convince them to drop out and back your guy so that you can get what you needed. Now, having said that, in Charlemagne the God asked him about his popularity among the black youth vote. He said, "Oh, I got this. I got the old ones. I got the young ones." Well, the fact is, he doesn't have the young ones, and they support a standards and progressive movement more than what Joe's throwing out there. And it doesn't matter how much he says he's going to go left. He ain't going left. He's been a center his whole life. He's going to stay center. And 27% of the population of a small state said, yeah, no, you know what? I know it's only about 30%.
I'm gonna throw something out here. I'm
locking it down. Joe Biden should not be our nominee.
I would prefer
numbers like that, as much as they might look better than Trump's.
I would prefer. Listen, you're preaching to the choir, because I would prefer Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders.
Well, you know what?
But let me.
I'm locking it down right now. So
you lock
your shit down. I'm locking my shit down.
All right, but I just.
Now
at the end of the day, it's going to require that all the millennials and little liberal snowflakes who don't show up for midterms.
That's the problem.
If you really want to change the world, what you're going to need to do is show up for every election and vote consistently. You can't just show up on presidential elections because you're enamored with a candidate like people were with a Barack Obama.
Right.
And the other thing is too, that at the end of the day, if it is, it's most likely going to be Joe Biden as the candidate. And I liken it to this. You're on fire. You've got a bucket of water. You got a bucket of gasoline. If you vote for Joe Biden, you're going to get a bucket of water and you're going to be wet, but you're not going to be on fire. If you allow Trump to get back into the office, you just dump the gasoline on yourself while you're on fire.
I disagree. I think because you're looking at a bucket-sized fire. What we have is we've got a California forest fire, and we're taking a bucket of water to that. And Joe Biden is that bucket of water. He's going to do absolutely nothing, and the fire's going to continue to burn.
At the end of the day, the massive change you're talking about has to happen locally, at state level, and then grow out.
It has to work like lightning, Tony. It has to work like lightning.
No system in nature ever changes from the top down.
Lightning does. And lightning creates the spark. Lightning meets halfway.
Lightning's not a living. All right, I'm going to give you it. Lightning's not a living creature. All right. Okay, so you never have a situation where the lion determines, all right, what plants are growing in an ecosystem. It's the plants that grow from the soil, from the ground up, that determine the consumers all the way down the food chain, all the way up to the highest level. And if you cut the grass,
that's true.
It'll starve the top predators.
That's true. Now,
at the end of the day, listen, it's my own view. It's listen,
grass doesn't have free will.
I would prefer plants. Plants are much more in terms of like their ability to adapt and change where they grow and how they grow. They're I'm not going to say they're intelligent per se, but their evolutionary choices, where they end up.
Sure. But they need a couple things, right? They need water, they need sun, they need nutrients from the soil. They don't have a choice. They go seek it, they get it. We need healthcare, we need food, we need good jobs, we need all this stuff. But yet we put people in place to make decisions that don't give us those things. So yes, I agree that there has to be a grassroots effort to make that happen. That's true. But you have to have leaders at the top that want to support those efforts, and you have to meet in the middle. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. If you don't agree and I don't agree, we have to find middle ground.
At the end of the day, leaders, if the overwhelming majority of their people are basically in revolt against their system, look at the 60s. Perfect example. Vietnam, we'd still be in Vietnam fighting if it weren't for the fact that students got out in the streets and turned the country upside down.
Well, I think it was more. I would think it was more soldiers that came over, became politicians, and spoke up and said, "Hey, listen, here's the
But
problem."
that's
Students in the street. We tried that. We tried that with the Occupy Wall Street movement. The kids from
listen,
Florida.
If you don't have, if those young people who support Bernie or Elizabeth Warren don't stay consistent and don't sit there, because what's happening is that they're acting like spoiled brats. And here's my thing. To me, it's like a little kid dropping to the floor of the supermarket in the cereal aisle because you didn't get the sugary cereal you wanted.
No, I think I disagree with that, because you know what happens when you ask for something, and you ask your parents, and you ask and you constantly get no, 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 no. You stop asking. And that's what our young kids, that's what the millennials are doing now, because they've been asking the government to do this. They've been begging the government to do this and do this. They've been told no, no, no. So they don't show up because they're sick and tired of not being heard. So their protest is, I'm not going to say anything at all. And it's wrong, because they should stand up. But I understand their method. I understand their message that, listen, you're not going to listen to us anyway. And you hear it. I talk to my kids all the time about it. Like, they're like, what does it matter? My vote doesn't matter. And I have to convince them that it does, even though in reality, it doesn't. Because at the end of the day, people with the money are going to make the decisions. And that's why we have a Trump in office. That's why we have Joe Biden as our Democratic nominee. And that's the fact, because Bernie Sanders, I tell you what, I tweeted today, someone said something, I made a comment, I said, you know what? I gave money to Bernie Sanders. I sought him out to donate, and then his campaign sought me out to donate more, which I gladly gave. Joe Biden has not sought me out once, probably hasn't asked you out for anything, or anyone else who's listening. And I'm not willing to give him a cent, even if he does, because he never said, hey, listen, I'm here for you. And that is the problem with what the millennials are going through right now. No one is here for them, and they don't want to support an old guy like this. That's why Bernie, the Democrats were saying, we're going to put Pete Buttigieg because he's young. He can get the young vote. And who did all the youth turn to? They turned to to Papa Bernie Sanders. Looked like goddamn Papa Smurf, right? They went for him because of the message. And if you don't have someone at the top dangling that thread, no one's going to climb up to get it.
My best argument to you about how the party can change: the Republican Party did not change from the top down. The Republican Party changed from the bottom up.
I give you number 3, the third party. That's how the Democrats are going to change, because you make a dangerous socialist Democrat party, an independent party, you're going to change the Democrats. And you know what? That's the problem with the United States. Other countries have more than one party, more than 2 parties. All right. Our problem is we only say you're either left or you're right. Well, there's a shit ton of middle space, and there's a whole bunch of going on. And what we've been doing, we don't have a real left.
Listen, this is not the time to get experimental.
Now is the time.
No, this is not the time to get experimental, because
I'll tell you why.
Because you know what? You get a re-election of Trump. If he gets back in office,
dude, he's going to get back in office.
If he gets back in office, don't expect to have another election.
No, I know, but he's going to get back because you had the population in your hand. You had everyone backed up, and you're putting up garbage to fight a pseudo god.
Listen, it's at the end of the day. Again, I think that I think that like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think that she's a perfect example how one person, she's one of a few very progressive people that got in 2018.
She just played politics and jumped to support Biden.
Because she knows that when you're on fire, pour water over yourself, not gasoline.
It's the size of the fire. It's the size of the fire. Listen, and I'll tell you what, from someone who started forest fires, those fires start on the top, they burn underneath, and they pop up somewhere else. And all Joe Biden is a Band-Aid on a gunshot.
At the end of the day, all right. At the end of the day, that it's basically it's going to be incremental. It's going to be an evolution. It's not going to be a revolution.
Well, listen,
And at the end of the day,
we've been blessed. I hate to say this is going to sound terrible, but the COVID-19 has actually been a blessing for America in the sense that all this shutdown is giving us an opportunity to see where we need to focus our resources.
Absolutely.
And so this is the moment. It is a reset button, and we're not going to press it because we want to go back. We want to transition to greatness, to quote dumb Trump, and we want to go back to things when things were better, to quote Biden. But you know what? Things aren't going to be better. Things weren't better. Things weren't better in the 50s because we didn't have the technology that we have now.
To me, this is like when Joe Rogan talked about the fact he supported Bernie Sanders, but now he says he's going to probably vote for Trump. Well, explain to me at what level does Trump line up with any of the values of Bernie Sanders on one issue?
It doesn't. It's just a populist. It's a populist vote. That's the thing. Because we don't want corporate Democrats back in office. We just don't. And this is the moment to make that change. And we're just not going to do it. We're going to run to the end zone. But we're going to drop the ball at the 20.
Listen, this is like saying, listen, I don't like where we're driving, so I'm going to go drive off a cliff.
No, that's absolutely not.
Oh,
what you do is you reroute. If you don't like where you're driving, you reroute and you find.
But I'm saying that,
and that's exactly what we're doing here. That's why Google does it all the time.
If we get Trump in the 3.5 years he's been in office, has fundamentally changed our entire government institution in ways that are damaging.
Has he? Because we've always
absolutely
really we've always had corporate people in cabinets and at the top. That hasn't changed.
It's the
only thing that's changed is he's an idiot and he's dangerous.
The deregulation,
we had that under Reagan. We had that under Bush's. We had deregulation in the past.
He's unprecedented. The weaponizing of our government.
That's true. That's true.
The weaponizing of our State Department. The weaponizing of our Justice Department to go after political opponents. The fact that he threatened to withhold federal disaster aid to Michigan, all right, for political means, because he didn't like the fact that Whitmer's doing mail-in voting. That is completely. This makes Nixon look like a choir boy. This is off the charts.
That's true. That's true. But as a system, he hasn't really changed the system at all. Draining the swamp. He didn't do anything. He just switched the swamp creatures around.
No, he made them bigger.
Yeah.
And they're basically all orange furred swamp monsters.
Right, but this is my point. This is the time to reset, and we need the people in the office.
I don't disagree with the fundamentals of your beef. All right, I don't disagree.
Well, I'm locking that down. I'm locked in. Bye now.
My disagreement is that in reality, if you really want change, it's not going to be like hitting a light switch. You better be in it for the long haul, and you better be in it to do it ground up. That's my lock-in.
You don't have to lock it in twice. You've clearly never taken a Band-Aid off. All right, you don't take it off bit at a time. You rip it off, done, and then you heal. You rip it off and you heal, and that's what we need to do. And that's it. I think we should end.
All right,
I'm going to
lock it down.
All right, I've locked it down.
All right, I'm cutting. Listen, folks. I hope you enjoyed our battle. All right.
Our rant, our idiot rant.
Yes. All right. Have a good night.
All right.